His room was filled with noise that no one else could hear: fear, regret, memories, unanswered prayers, and the endless voice of doubt. His phone buzzed every few minutes with notifications he no longer cared about. Videos played in the background only to distract him from the ache inside his chest. He had become surrounded by noise so constantly that he no longer remembered what peace sounded like. He sat on the edge of his bed staring at the ceiling. "God," he whispered weakly, "why can't I hear you anymore?" No answer came immediately, only silence. And somehow the silence hurt more than the noise. Elijah used to believe strongly. Years ago, faith felt easy to him. He prayed with confidence. He worshipped with tears in his eyes. He believed that heaven listened. But life had changed him. His father had passed away unexpectedly. His closest friend betrayed him. Dreams he spent years building collapsed in front of him. And slowly, disappointment turned his heart into a crowded room filled with confusion. Now every thought fought for his attention. "You failed. You're forgotten. Nothing will change. You prayed before and nothing happened." The noise never stopped. One rainy evening, Elijah walked through the city streets without direction. Cars rushed past him. Neon signs flashed everywhere. People laughed outside restaurants while he carried a heaviness no one could see. He entered a small old bookstore only to escape the rain. The place smelled like dust and old paper. Soft instrumental music played quietly in the background. An elderly man stood behind the counter reading a worn Bible. "You look tired," the old man said gently. Elijah forced a smile. "Long week." The man nodded as though he understood more than Elijah had said. "Sometimes," the man replied. "It's not the week that makes people tired, it's the noise." Elijah froze slightly. The old man closed his Bible. "The world is loud," he continued. "Fear is loud. Social media is loud. Opinions are loud. Pain is loud, but God rarely shouts." Elijah looked down. "I used to hear him," he admitted quietly. The man smiled softly. "Maybe he never stopped speaking. Maybe you stopped being still." Those words stayed with Elijah long after he left the bookstore. That night he returned home and sat in darkness without turning on the television. For the first time in months, he placed his phone face down and simply sat there. The silence felt uncomfortable. His mind immediately filled the emptiness. What about tomorrow? What if nothing changes? What if you fail again? The noise rushed back like a storm. But then another thought came quietly. Not louder, just calmer. "You are not alone." Elijah opened his eyes slowly. The thought felt different, gentle, peaceful, not condemning, not fearful. And for the first time in a long while, he wondered if God had been speaking all along in ways quieter than the chaos around him. The next morning, Elijah decided to do something unusual. He woke up before sunrise and drove outside the city to a hill overlooking the countryside. There were no crowds there. No advertisements, no traffic, only wind moving softly through the grass. The sky slowly changed from black to deep blue and then to gold. As the sun rose, Elijah closed his eyes. "God," he whispered, "I'm listening." No thunder shook the earth. No voice echoed from heaven. But deep inside his heart, something began to settle. Memories started returning to him, not painful ones, but moments he had forgotten. The time God provided money exactly when his family needed it. The prayer that was answered unexpectedly years ago. The accident he somehow survived. The stranger who encouraged him at the exact right moment. God had always been there, always speaking, always guiding. But pain had become so loud that Elijah stopped noticing. Tears rolled down his face quietly. "I thought you abandoned me," he said, and within his spirit came a calm response. "I never left." Elijah stayed on the hill for hours. As the wind moved around him, he realized something important. Noise is not only sound. Sometimes noise is worry. Sometimes noise is pride. Sometimes noise is comparison. Sometimes noise is guilt replaying old mistakes again and again. And sometimes noise is the constant pressure to keep moving so fast that the soul never rests long enough to hear God. For years, Elijah had filled every silent moment with distractions because silence forced him to confront what was inside him. But now he understood something deeper. Healing often begins in silence. Over the next few weeks, Elijah changed small things in his life. He stopped beginning every morning with endless scrolling online. Instead, he sat quietly for 10 minutes before touching his phone. He started taking walks without headphones. He prayed honestly instead of repeating empty words. He read scripture slowly instead of rushing through it. And little by little, the noise inside him became weaker. Not instantly, not perfectly, but gradually. One afternoon, Elijah met his friend Daniel for coffee. "You seem different," Daniel said. Elijah smiled slightly. "I think I've been too distracted to hear God." Daniel laughed softly. "Same here." "No," Elijah replied thoughtfully. "I mean really distracted. I kept asking God why he was silent while I surrounded myself with noise every second." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "That makes sense," Elijah nodded. "We think peace comes from controlling life, but peace actually comes from listening to God even when life feels out of control." Daniel became quiet after hearing that. For the first time in a while, Elijah realized his pain was no longer controlling every conversation. Something inside him had changed. Months passed. Life did not suddenly become perfect. Bills still came. Problems still appeared. Some prayers still remained unanswered. But Elijah was no longer drowning in chaos. Because now he knew where to go when the world became loud. One evening during a storm, the electricity in his apartment went out. Rain hit the windows violently while darkness filled the room. Old fear tried to return. But instead of panicking, Elijah lit a candle and sat quietly. The storm outside reminded him of the storm he once carried inside himself. Then suddenly he remembered something the old man in the bookstore had said. God rarely shouts. Elijah smiled to himself. The world teaches people to chase louder things constantly. Louder opinions, louder entertainment, louder success, louder attention. But God often speaks in stillness, in quiet conviction, in peace that arrives without explanation, in moments when the heart becomes calm enough to listen. As thunder rolled outside, Elijah opened his Bible and his eyes landed on a verse. "Be still and know that I am God." He read it again slowly. Be still, not anxious, not rushing, not striving endlessly, still. Tears filled his eyes once more because he finally understood. God was never absent. The noise simply became too powerful. The next day Elijah returned to the old bookstore, but when he entered, he noticed someone else behind the counter. "Excuse me," Elijah asked, "where's the older man who worked here?" The woman smiled sadly. "My father owned this store," she said, "but he passed away 2 months ago." Elijah's heart sank. "Passed away?" She nodded gently. "He loved talking to people about faith." Elijah stood there speechless. 2 months ago. That meant the old man had spoken to Elijah shortly before his death. The woman handed Elijah a small folded note. "He told me if a young man named Elijah ever came back, I should give him this." With shaking hands, Elijah opened the note. Inside were only a few words written carefully. "When the noise becomes unbearable, return to the quiet place. God is waiting there." Elijah closed his eyes tightly as emotion overwhelmed him. That small meeting had changed his life. He left the bookstore holding the note close to his chest. Outside, the city remained loud as ever. Cars honked. People hurried down sidewalks. Screens flashed everywhere. But this time, the noise no longer ruled him. Because deep inside, beneath all the chaos of the world, Elijah had discovered something stronger than fear. The voice of God. Not controlling, not condemning, not filled with panic, but steady, loving, patient, and always near. Years later, Elijah would share his story with others struggling the same way he once struggled. He spoke to exhausted people carrying hidden pain, to people addicted to distraction because silence scared them, to people convinced God had stopped speaking. And he always told them the same thing: God still speaks. But sometimes you must turn down the noise to hear him. One young woman asked him during a gathering, "How do I know if God is speaking?" Elijah smiled softly before answering. The voice of fear pushes you into panic. The voice of the world pushes you into comparison. But the voice of God leads you toward peace, truth, wisdom, and love, even when correcting you. The room became silent. Then Elijah added one final thought. Your soul was never designed to live buried beneath endless noise. That night, after everyone left, Elijah walked outside beneath a sky filled with stars. The air was cool and peaceful. He remembered the broken man he used to be, exhausted, distracted, hopeless, unable to hear anything beyond his own fear. And quietly, under the night sky, he whispered, "Thank you for never stopping your voice, even when I stopped listening." The wind moved gently around him, and in the silence he felt peace again.